Hello all, it's week 6. We spent last week reading about entrepreneurship and talking about intrapreneurship and MSU's culture of entrepreneurship, especially in terms of undergraduate education and support for your ideas and projects. This week we're going to shift gears and talk about social and cultural entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is often associated with for-profit corporate activities. Social and cultural entrepreneurship, however, extends that work and focuses on public and social good. A lot of businesses say they're engaged in social good, and a lot of businesses are engaged in social good. But I would argue that for a business to truly be engaged in social entrepreneurship, social good has to be baked in to its mission and vision and values. So in this video, I'm going to talk a bit more about social and cultural entrepreneurship, introduce our week 6 readings, cases, and sparks, and introduce our creativity quest 2 assignment. Timmy Stoop-Alcala, in an article called The Intrinsic Value of Culture for Entrepreneurs, synthesizes some of the work of Cultura, an organization that supports Filipino cultural entrepreneurs. And her article includes a version of the graphic you see on the screen. Stoop-Alcala argues that all entrepreneurs create use value and economic value, are innovative, seek and maximize profits, are alert to emergent opportunities, take and manage risks, engage in strategic thinking in organizations, are leaders, and are dedicated. This should remind you of our discussion of the entrepreneurial mindset from last week. Further, though, Stoop-Alcala notes that social entrepreneurs create social value through their work and are visionary in their orientation. They're catalysts for social change. And to all of this, she argues, cultural entrepreneurs add explicit cultural value, which might be educational, symbolic, spiritual, social, communal, historic, political, and more. So let's break these distinctions down a bit further, and we'll talk about social entrepreneurship first. Pravin Vise, a professor and entrepreneur, distinguishes social entrepreneurship from capital or business entrepreneurship by arguing that social entrepreneurship focuses on trying to make the world a better place to live, focusing more on the greater good, engaging in projects that may or may not generate direct monetary income, and investing a lot of their time and energy in changing society, sometimes a little in return. The Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship offers a definition of social entrepreneurship, but more interestingly, I think they offer a list of characteristics. The Schwab Foundation claims that social entrepreneurs are people who achieve large-scale, systemic, and sustainable social change through new invention, a different approach, a more rigorous application of known technologies or strategies, or a combination of these. But one of the things I hope you take from this class and from the work we're doing is that not all change has to be large scale. Entre and intrapreneurs also engage in small, potent gestures that can have big ripple effects. But Schwab argues that social entrepreneurs aim for big change. They also focus on social or ecological value creation. Financial value, of course, matters, but the social and the ecological come first. And social entrepreneurs, according to Schwab, innovate by finding a new product, a new service, or a new approach to a social problem. They continuously refine and adapt their approaches. They're responsive to feedback and critique. They're innovative, they act sustainably, they think constantly about reach, and they aim for social impact above any other priority. And finally, Schwab argues, they combine the characteristics represented by Richard Branson and Mother Teresa. Richard Branson's key characteristics are that he's determined, he's passionate, he's engaged in what he does. He perseveres when problems arise. He has personality, he's extroverted, agreeable, conscientious, enthusiastic, and warm. Back in 2006, an MSU student launched the Hometown Invasion Tour. Bugsy Rocker, aka Justin Saylor, got support from Jeep and spent a year driving to and staying with different families in all 50 states. One of Justin's lifelong post-invasion dreams was to have a beer with Richard Branson. So he launched a website called Beer with Branson and a campaign to connect with Branson. He called it, in part, a big Twitter experiment. He was curious about how social media could potentially connect anybody in the world. And in 2014, Branson was in Grand Rapids to speak to an economic council. Justin set up a table in the hallway where Branson was speaking with 2 glasses and a beer, and had beer with Branson. If you're interested in seeing what Bugsy, aka Justin, is up to today, check out his website. Mother Teresa is remembered and cherished as a person who was caring and selfless, strong, incisive, persuasive. She spoke up for others and was idealistic in nature, but pragmatic in action. Someone who combines some of these traits and is often pointed to as an example of social entrepreneurship is Blake Mycoskie, the founder and chief shoe giver of Tom's Shoes. Mycoskie was stunned when he found out that many people, especially in developing countries and especially children, lack shoes, protection for their feet. He met a woman who worked with a volunteer group that held shoe drives in the U.S. to collect and send shoes to people in need. And eventually Mycoskie formed and built Tom's, which calls itself a one-for-one company. When you buy a product is donated to someone in need. We'll read more about Mycoskie this week. In 2019, Tom's released an impact report of their work over the last 13 years. They've given 95 million pairs of shoes. Recognizing and realizing they were able to meet needs beyond providing basic footwear, they've contributed to more than 780,000 sight restorations by providing eye surgery and glasses and more. They've provided more than 722,000 weeks of safe water to communities in need. Every $3 they make, they give away $1. That's more than 30% of their revenue to provide shoes, eye and vision care, safe water, and grants to support community projects. They've expanded this work more recently into a COVID relief initiative and global giving fund. Another example of a person that innovated the social entrepreneurship landscape is Muhammad Yunus, and you'll read a chapter this week from his book. His work began in the 1970s when he realized poor people were completely restricted from the loans and financing banks were offering, and that very small loans could make a huge impact on people, especially women's lives in developing countries. So he started a microfinancing program where small loans make a huge difference for individuals. These aren't gifts or charitable donations. They're loans that are repaid. One of the really compelling arguments Yunus makes in the chapter we'll read this week is that when things fall apart, we can redesign, recast, and rebuild. We should not miss an opportunity to convert our financial institutions into inclusive institutions. Nobody should be refused access to financial services. Because these services are so vital for people's self-realization, credit should be given the status of a human right. Grameen Bank is the microfinancing bank that Yunus created and that now serves more than 8 million borrowers, too poor for traditional banks to take them seriously. Grameen Bank and Yunus won a Nobel Prize for this work. Earlier, I argued there's a difference between businesses who do some social good and businesses who have social good baked into their mission, vision, and business model. Ben & Jerry's began when 2 guys took a $5 by-mail class on ice cream making. And then they got $12,000 in starter funds and opened a shop in an old gas station in Vermont. In 1985, the Ben & Jerry's Foundation was established, and the company allocated 7.5% of their annual pre-tax profits to fund community-focused projects. In 2002, Ben & Jerry's released One Sweet World, a flavor in partnership with SaveOurEnvironment.org. In the 2000s, they engaged in government action, environmental campaigns, fair trade initiatives, and more. In 2011, the founders of the company gave out ice cream in New York City in solidarity with protesters during Occupy Wall Street. In 2018, Ben & Jerry's created Pecan Resist to protest Trump administration policies, the containers for which featured artwork by Fabiana Rodriguez, an Oakland, California artist whose work focuses on social justice, feminism, environmental justice, and immigrant rights. In 2019, Ben & Jerry's launched Justice Remix to promote criminal justice reform. Admittedly, Ben & Jerry's history isn't all goodness. In 2000, Ben & Jerry's became a subsidiary of Unilever. Unilever makes a lot of goods and products, including products with fantastically sexist ad campaigns, like Axe body spray. One of Axe's 2010 campaigns, for instance, was Men with Braids, which implied that men who are friends with women are seen as women. The tagline was "Stop being a friend and start being a man." suggesting that if you're a man and you're not sleeping with the women around you, you're not really a man. That said, Unilever's history and practices haven't all been bad. In their global marketing, Unilever, for instance, has situated themselves as complementary to, and not necessarily in direct competition with local businesses. And Ben & Jerry's did something pretty unique in negotiating an agreement to preserve their social mission, even as they became part of Unilever. They negotiated to retain an independent board of directors, and on their website, the directors' bios look pretty different from typical board of directors listings, which often include the person's degree, what university they went to, their business credentials and affiliations. On the Ben & Jerry's board of directors site, they include favorite music, favorite book, an NPO or social environmental cause the person is associated with. Here, board member Darren Dodson notes that his commitment is to business justice, a term he coined to describe what I think is an extension of social justice, where business leaders embrace people's hearts, minds, and resources to achieve justice, peace, and freedom. I know of no other major company as transparent about its values, vision, and processes, or as activist in its nature. Imagine if Ford had come out with a car in resistance to President Trump's policies, or Mars Candy Company producing a flavor of M&Ms calling for prison reform. Ben & Jerry's actually employs people as corporate activists. They hire people to engage in social change and action on behalf of and leveraging the company's resources. Ben & Jerry's has supported racial justice for a long time, but gained a lot of attention last summer when they came out with perhaps the most powerful and pointed corporate written statement about the killing of George Floyd and our cultural context of white supremacy. The statement read in part, "What happened to George Floyd was not the result of a bad apple. It was the predictable consequence of a racist and prejudiced system and culture that has treated Black bodies as the enemy from its beginning." And they didn't just call for an end to white supremacy, but suggested and engaged in direct anti-racist cultural action. Blake Mycoskie and Tom's, Muhammad Yunus and Grameen Bank, and Ben & Jerry's long-term social commitment are good examples to anchor social entrepreneurship. A slightly more slippery concept is that of cultural entrepreneurship. I mentioned earlier, I think of cultural entrepreneurship as ways of leveraging arts and culture to enhance an area economically. And I'm going to share 3 examples of this. First, recently, Sweden became the first country to adopt a typeface, a font. Most countries, as an NPR story about Sweden noted, have a national flag, an anthem, a bird. These things help to anchor the country's unique cultural identity. But more and more countries have turned toward the business practice of branding and used it to culturally brand their unique aspects and elements. And this is a really interesting example of a business practice being put to work in terms of cultural entrepreneurship. And in this context, the entire culture, the entire country is the entrepreneurial initiative. Most countries want to attract businesses, artists, and national recognition, and Sweden has adopted a particularly smart strategy for anchoring its world identity. Along with a specific font face, Sweden has also adopted a color scheme. This color scheme and typography is for use on websites, press releases, tourism brochures, and more. And if Sweden succeeds, when people see these 2 colors together, or they see and recognize this particular typeface, they should immediately think Sweden. They will have culturally anchored their brand. Companies are very good at branding, but arts and cultural industries typically aren't. Communities and cities can embrace their cultural industries to anchor their identity, and a great example of this is Grand Rapids, which is world known for its renowned International Art Prize competition. Grand Rapids has leveraged Art Prize to anchor its cultural identity. Art Prize is, as the organizers describe it, a radically open, independently organized international art competition. For 19 days every fall, 3 square miles of downtown Grand Rapids become an open playing field where anyone can find a voice in the conversation about what is art and why it matters. The organizers note art from around the world pops up in every inch of downtown in over 160 venues, museums, galleries, bars, restaurants, theaters, hotels, public parks, lobbies, buildings, walls, bridges, laundromats, and auto body shops. And it's all free and open to the public. It's unorthodox, highly disruptive, and undeniably intriguing to the art world and to the broader public alike. The 2017 winner of a $200,000 Jurors Grand Prize was Seitu Jones's Heartside Community Meal. More than 250 people ate a meal together. The purpose of the meal, as Jones described it, was threefold: to remind us of food rituals as absolutely inherently culturally anchored, but also shared. Food, Jones argued, exposes our differences and inequities, and also illuminates our similarities and connections. And the meal was just part of the experience. The people who participated engaged in discussions of healthy food access. So overall, the goal in this art project was to meet across cultures and make people more aware of healthy food access. And healthy food access is a particularly interesting social and cultural entrepreneurial challenge. Think about it. Most big, good stores that offer a wide variety of healthy foods are out in the suburbs. You have to have a car to easily get there and stock up on food. COVID, of course, has changed that. More and more places offer food delivery, but there's a cost with food delivery, and tips are often expected. In my neighborhood in South Lansing, there's a Kroger, and it's kind of walkable, but not if you're buying a lot of groceries. A lot of people in my neighborhood shop as best they can as Quality Dairy or one of the liquor marts in our neighborhood, and you can't get kale or oranges at the Quickie Mart. The 2018 grand prize winner was The String Project by Chelsea Nix and Mariano Cortez, a husband-wife team of travel photographers. They traveled all over the world and invited people to hold a string. The goal of the project was to symbolize the invisible connection we all have to one another, to remind us that some of the most valuable things in life, respect, hope, peace, compassion, love, empathy, integrity, are authentic and genuine interactions that humans crave. Art Prize will be held again this September 16th through October 3rd, 2021, an hour away from Lansing. It serves to anchor Grand Rapids as a cultural capital, and it brings together hundreds of thousands of people around public art. It's a great example of a city and a community engaged in cultural entrepreneurship. For one last example, I want to head to Nebraska. A couple of years ago, MSU invited back Andrew and Angie Norman. Andrew's an MSU alum, and together the two of them founded and run Here Nebraska. Here Nebraska is what I would consider to be a hybrid organization. It's a nonprofit, but it's one that leverages entrepreneurial ideas and work to make cultural change. The vision of Here Nebraska is to make the state a globally recognized cultural destination.
The Nebraska we see is full of life.
It's full of energy.
It's full of creativity.
It's full of passion.
It's full of hardworking people
Who want to close their eyes sometimes and connect with something greater than themselves.
Sometimes that comes in a church.
Sometimes it's in a field.
And sometimes it's amid a sweaty crowd, biting their lips, raising their fist to a musician.
who traveled from across the country
Across the world.
Or across the street to perform original art at a Nebraska venue.
But what really gets us excited is the creative energy in the state.
It's the ability to surround oneself with brewers and chefs,
developers, designers, songwriters and poets,
farmers and carpenters,
who are all driven to create something original, something uniquely them.
We produce events that bring together people across disciplines, races, ages, and sexes
to experience something new and always something surprising.
And we have our finger on the pulse of the young people who are deciding whether they should make a life somewhere else
or stay and make that life here.
We don't know what you see when you picture Nebraska,
but we know what we see.
At Here Nebraska, we work our asses off to make sure the rest of the world sees it too.
Join us.
Here Nebraska engages this mission by highlighting Nebraska artists, venues, and arts organizations. They run a Here Nebraska radio site. They produce and promote music events across the state. For many of the events, they bring in a famous Nebraska artist who performs alongside a local artist. They engage in both cultural and economic development. So cultural entrepreneurship is obviously culturally situated and framed, cultural entrepreneurship. But social entrepreneurship is also culturally situated and framed. Any social entrepreneurial project is engaged within an area, a community, and a culture. Any project has to attend to the cultural and often global dynamics at play. In our readings, Cases, and Sparks for Week 6 explore this a bit further. The first reading is a chapter by Blake Mykoski where he talks about starting Tom's shoes. The second reading is by Mohammed Yunus, who describes his social business concept. Our first creativity case is a Forbes article spotlighting 30 social entrepreneurs under 30. Read the framing article. And then our second case is to take a look at some of the profiles and the businesses of these young social entrepreneurs. We have 2 sparks for the week. One is Google's commitment statement and website. Most people wouldn't necessarily label Google a social enterprise, but I would argue they're a richly socially engaged company and are innovative and creative across the ways their products and work paths engage social good. Our second spark is Detroit Dirt, a compost production and provisioner just down the road in Detroit. A couple of weeks ago in Pack Bag, Joe S. asked, what's better for creativity, freedom or constraints? And Creativity Quest 2 is a space for you to explore creativity with constraints. For Creativity Quest 2, we're going to work with creative remixing, which is part of our focus for next week, week 7. For Creativity Quest 2, you're going to put creative remixing into action by using a set of audio clips, images, and video clips to create an argument about creativity that showcases your creativity. The catch here, though, is creativity with constraints. We're all going to be using the same materials to build our short videos. You can add brief text and use transitions and effects in your video editing software, but you may not use any other materials other than those available for download on D2L. So check out the full Creativity Quest 2 assignment, which includes some suggestions about what software to use and how to get started, a couple of example student remix videos, and the materials you can use to create your video. These are all in D2L in the syllabus, assignments, and Dropboxes subfolder. So again, our week 6 focus is on social and cultural entrepreneurship and how people are engaged in creative, innovative work that allows them not only to generate profit, but to make a difference in the world. Spend some time with our week 6 readings, cases, and sparks. Post a question and a response on Packback, and review the full Creativity Quest 2 assignment on D2L. And as always, text me, email me, let me know if you have any questions.